The Queen Who Refused to Kneel. Smoke drags itself across the streets of Jhansi, thick and choking, the kind that clings to your lungs and tells you this city is running out of time. British cannons hammer the fortress walls, stone cracks, people scream. Orders are shouted in sharp, foreign syllables that bounce off buildings already bleeding dust. And above it all, on the high ramparts where queens are supposed to pray and wait and disappear, a woman is tightening the straps of her armor. She does not look toward the city. She looks toward the battlefield. She binds her infant son to her back with cloth pulled tight across her shoulders, not because she thinks it will keep him safe, but because she will not leave him behind. She swings onto her horse. Steel flashes as she lifts her sword. Below her, soldiers hesitate, because this is not how conquered queens are supposed to behave. This is not how widows are supposed to face empires. This is not how history expects women to meet cannons. Her name is Lakshmi Bai, Rani of Jhansi, and tonight she will ride straight into the kind of legend that makes empires nervous long after the smoke clears. But before the armor, before the cannons, before the stories that made British officers write her name with clenched jaws, she was a girl who refused to learn how to be quiet. The girl who refused to be small. She was born Manikarnika in 1828, in a world that already had very clear plans for girls like her. Be graceful, be obedient, be forgettable. She chose none of the above. While other girls were taught how to lower their eyes, she was climbing trees, riding horses bareback, and learning how to fight from boys who quickly realized she was not playing. She learned swordplay the way other children learned games. She learned to aim before she learned to curtsy. She learned how to fall and get back up without waiting for permission. People called her stubborn, unladylike, too loud. Her teachers called her troublesome. Her friends called her fearless. And deep down, something inside her already knew that the world would not make space for her, so she would have to carve it herself. Even as a child, she carried herself like someone who expected life to challenge her and was already bracing for impact. She did not yet know about empire, or treaties, or the polite paperwork of conquest, but she already understood something most people learn too late. Strength is not a gift. It is a habit, and she was building it every day. She had no idea yet that one day she would need every ounce of it, not to survive childhood, but to face an empire that would try to erase her, her people, and her crown in the same breath. From wild girl to queen of Jhansi. Manikarnika did not grow up dreaming of palaces, but history loves sharp turns. While she was still a teenager, fate placed her in the path of a man who ruled a small but proud kingdom, Jhansi, and who saw in her not just beauty but steel. She married Raja Gangadhar Rao, and with that, the girl who raced horses through dusty fields became Lakshmi Bai, Rani of Jhansi. The palace expected a gentle queen, a ceremonial presence, a quiet companion. What they got was a woman who still trained with swords, who rode with soldiers, who studied strategy instead of embroidery. Courtiers whispered. Some disapproved. Others quietly respected her. Because Jhansi did not sit in a safe corner of India, it sat on the edge of British ambition. By the mid-1800s, the British East India Company was no longer just trading spices and textiles. It was swallowing kingdoms through contracts, pressure, and polite-sounding laws written in someone else's language. Some rulers resisted. Some cooperated. Most tried to survive. Jhansi walked a careful line. Lakshmi Bai learned diplomacy as fiercely as she had learned combat. She met British officers face to face. She spoke calmly. She watched closely. She understood that power did not always arrive with guns. Sometimes it arrived with documents. For a brief moment, it almost worked. Then tragedy arrived, not with soldiers, but with silence. Her infant son died. The palace mourned, the kingdom worried, because without a biological heir, Jhansi's future became dangerously negotiable. So, Lakshmi Bai and her husband did what Indian rulers had done for generations. They adopted a son, a boy named Damodar Rao. In their world, adoption carried full royal legitimacy. In the British world, it did not. And somewhere far away, in offices that smelled of ink and empire, men began rewriting Jhansi's fate without ever stepping inside its walls. Lakshmi Bai did not know it yet, but her kingdom had just been placed on a list. And empires, once they start making lists, do not stop until something is crossed out. The law that stole a queen's kingdom. The letter did not arrive with soldiers. It arrived with polite language. British officials called it policy. They called it procedure. They called it law. They called it the doctrine of lapse. If an Indian ruler died without a natural-born male heir, the British East India Company would take control of the kingdom. No negotiations, no exceptions, no appeals that mattered. Adopted sons did not count. Traditions did not count. Centuries of sovereignty did not count. Only British definitions did. When Raja Gangadhar Rao died, Lakshmi Bai did not have time to grieve properly. She had to defend her child's right to exist as a prince. She sent letters to British officials. She argued the law. She demanded recognition for her adopted son. And the replies came back cold. Jhansi was declared forfeit, not conquered, not defeated, simply claimed. British officers began preparing to take control of the fort, the treasury, the administration, everything her husband had ruled. And Lakshmi Bai was told politely that she could remain in the palace. As a pensioned widow, a queen reduced to a dependent, a kingdom reduced to paperwork. She did not scream. She did not riot. She wrote one line that history never forgot: "I shall not give up my Jhansi." But resistance does not always mean open war. Not yet. At first, she tried to hold the center. She managed court affairs. She protected her son. She kept order inside Jhansi's walls, while British influence crept closer outside them. She trained more, harder, longer, because deep down, she understood something that empires often forget. You can take land with laws, but you cannot take loyalty that way. And Jhansi's people were watching British officers replace their leaders, watching taxes rise, watching traditions dismissed as inconveniences, watching their queen stand straight when others bowed. The powder was already there. All it needed was a spark. And in 1857, India lit up. The year India erupted. In 1857, the rumor spread faster than any army could march. Soldiers whispered that new rifle cartridges were greased with cow and pig fat, sacred to Hindus, forbidden to Muslims. Villages whispered about forced conversions. Kings whispered about disappearing thrones. But beneath the rumors was something older and far more dangerous: resentment, decades of it. Indian soldiers, sepoys, turned their guns on British officers. Barracks exploded into mutiny. Cities rose. Forts fell. What began as a military revolt became something much larger: a rebellion, a war, a reckoning. And Jhansi sat directly in the path of the firestorm. At first, Lakshmi Bai tried to stay neutral. She had seen what open defiance cost smaller rulers. She had a child to protect, a city full of civilians depending on her restraint. But neutrality does not survive chaos. When British officers were killed in Jhansi during early uprisings, the company accused Lakshmi Bai of complicity, with no proof, no trial, no hearing. They decided she was guilty. They decided Jhansi was now an enemy. British troops began marching toward her kingdom, and suddenly the choice was gone. Lakshmi Bai did not flee. She did not send her son away. She stood on the walls of Jhansi Fort and did what queens had done for centuries when survival was on the line. She prepared for war. She organized defenses. She trained volunteers, men and women. She stocked weapons and food. She drilled soldiers herself, riding beside them, sword in hand. British officers would later write, with visible discomfort, that she was the most dangerous of all the rebel leaders, not because she was reckless, but because she was disciplined, focused, strategic. And then the British army arrived. Cannons roared against Jhansi's ancient walls, streets filled with smoke and blood, homes burned. For weeks, the city held. Lakshmi Bai fought on horseback, moving through the streets, rallying her troops, refusing to retreat, even as casualties mounted. But empires bring numbers, and eventually the walls were breached. British troops flooded the city. And now came the moment that turns leaders into legends. Rather than surrender, Lakshmi Bai strapped her son to her back, mounted her horse, and rode straight through enemy lines. Bullets flew, swords flashed, and she escaped the burning city of Jhansi like something out of epic poetry, not as a widow, not as a pensioner, but as a warrior queen in open rebellion against the British Empire. Jhansi had fallen, but Lakshmi Bai had not. And now she was no longer just defending a kingdom, she was leading a war. The queen who would not fall. After escaping Jhansi, Lakshmi Bai did not run toward safety. She rode straight toward more war. She joined forces with other rebel leaders, including Tatya Tope, brilliant, relentless, and just as committed to driving the British out of central India. Together, they moved like wildfire through the countryside. Villages rose, soldiers defected, old forts reopened their gates. And everywhere Lakshmi Bai went, people whispered the same thing: the Queen lives. She no longer fought only for Jhansi, she fought for every ruler who had been stripped of land, every village punished for disobedience, every child growing up under foreign guns. Her presence did something the British could not understand and could not stop. It turned fear into loyalty. Men followed her into battles they knew they might not survive, not because she promised victory, but because she fought beside them. Not behind the lines, not issuing commands from safety. On horseback, sword drawn, right where the fighting was worst. British officers began to describe her with a strange mix of rage and awe. They called her the Jezebel of India. They called her the most dangerous rebel. But even in their insults, the respect leaked through, because she kept winning. Then came Gwalior, a massive, strategic fortress city. If the rebels could hold Gwalior, they would control trade routes, supply lines, and morale across northern India. Lakshmi Bai and her allies captured it in a bold strike that stunned British commanders. For a moment, a breathtaking, fragile moment, it looked like the rebellion might actually succeed. But empires do not fall quietly. British reinforcements poured in. Artillery, fresh troops, orders to crush the rebels completely. And the final battle came at Kota Ki Serai, just outside Gwalior. June 1858. Heat shimmering over fields, smoke curling across ruined villages, horses screaming, men shouting in languages that no longer mattered. Lakshmi Bai rode into the fighting dressed as a cavalry officer, her son no longer on her back but safe with supporters. She fought hand to hand, sword, pistol, rage sharpened into focus. British witnesses would later say they didn't realize they were fighting the Queen until after she fell. She was wounded, badly, but she refused to be taken alive. Legend says she asked her companions to cremate her body so the British could not claim her as a trophy. And so they did. The British searched for her corpse. They never found it. What they found instead was something worse: a martyr, a symbol, a story that would not die. Lakshmi Bai was 29 years old. She had ruled only a few years, but she had stared down the largest empire on earth and refused to kneel. And that, to the people who remembered her, mattered more than victory. The Queen who never left. Empires expect one thing when they kill a rebel leader: silence. They expect fear to settle back into the ground like dust after marching boots. They expect people to move on, to forget, to lower their voices. That is not what happened after Lakshmi Bai died. The British declared the rebellion crushed. Reports were written, medals were awarded, maps were redrawn. But across India, something else was happening. People were telling her story, not as a defeat, as a warning. Songs spread first. Folk ballads carried from village to village, sung at night when soldiers weren't listening. Mothers told their children about a queen who rode into gunfire instead of away from it. Elders spoke her name softly, the way you speak about fire, with respect, with memory, with care. Lakshmi Bai did not become a footnote. She became a symbol. To the British, she was the most dangerous rebel leader of the uprising. To Indians, she was something far more powerful. Proof that resistance was possible. Proof that courage did not belong to empires. Proof that even when you lose, you can still change the future. And change it she did. Decades later, when Indian independence movements gained momentum, Lakshmi Bai's name returned, sharper, louder, impossible to ignore. Revolutionaries invoked her. Poets resurrected her. Schoolchildren memorized her story. She appeared in textbooks not as a tragedy, but as a spark. And here's the thing the British never quite understood. They thought her power came from her sword. It didn't. It came from what she represented. She was a woman denied a throne because she had no biological heir. So she adopted one and dared an empire to object. She was a ruler expected to submit politely and instead learn to fight. She was told that women belonged inside palaces and rode into battle with her child strapped to her back. She broke every rule the empire relied on to function, and that made her unforgettable. In India today, Lakshmi Bai is not remembered as the rebel who lost. She is remembered as Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi, warrior queen, mother of resistance, the woman who taught a colonized nation how to stand up. Statues of her show her mid-gallop, sword raised, hair flying free. Not mourning, not pleading, advancing. Because the truth is this, Lakshmi Bai did not fail. She showed the world what defiance looks like before it wins. And sometimes, that's the most dangerous thing of all. What they do with women who don't surrender. History likes its heroines tidy, soft, sorrowful, sacrificed in ways that make men feel noble and safe. Lakshmi Bai was none of those things. She did not die quietly. She did not accept her role. She did not make empire comfortable. And so, like so many women who disrupt power instead of decorating it, her story was argued over, softened, politicized, and reshaped depending on who was telling it. To the British, she became a problem to be solved. To colonial records, a threat to stability. To later historians, a symbol that was sometimes easier to praise than to truly understand. But to the people who lived under the weight of empire, she was a mirror. She reflected back a version of themselves they had been taught to forget. Brave, capable, unwilling to kneel. And that is what makes stories like hers dangerous even now. Because they remind us that oppression does not only collapse when systems fail, it collapses when ordinary people decide they are done being managed. Lakshmi Bai did not wake up wanting to be a revolutionary. She wanted to rule her kingdom, protect her child, live with dignity. And that's where we leave her. On the page, in the archive, in the rumor, in the shadow she carved into history. Maybe she was a villain. Maybe she was a victim. Maybe she was something far more dangerous. A woman who refused the role she was handed. But one thing is certain. The world wasn't ready for her then, and it still isn't now. If you enjoyed falling down this rabbit hole of power, defiance, and the women history tried to bury, make sure you're here for the next chapter, because there are more of them, more rebels, more survivors, more legends disguised as scandals. Until next time, keep questioning the stories you were told, and keep an eye on the women they warned you about.